Welcome, Ms. Lancy, ladies and gentlemen, to CDRI's podcast series on rapid and post-COVID-19 pandemic assessment. This podcast series is a part of a larger regional research project in the greater Mekong sub-region countries funded by Canada's International Development Research Centre. It aims to, firstly, disseminate knowledge and research findings of the impact of COVID-19 on socio-economic well-being of vulnerable groups, women, and micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. And secondly, to engage relevant stakeholders in discussions that contribute to knowledge building in relation to COVID-19 and its effects.
Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Bopharath, your host for today's session. In this episode, we discuss the impact of COVID-19 on private businesses, especially on micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, looking back to 2020 and forward in 2021. The COVID-19 pandemic has significantly disrupted economics and social activities, and it has adverse effects on business operations and revenues. It has negatively impacted a number of sectors, for example, agriculture, manufacturing, tourism, and hospitality, just to name a few. 1 year since the outbreak, uncertainties remain with a mixed assessment on when this pandemic and its effects are going to end. Today, my guest has an extensive experience in managing and supporting businesses and entrepreneurship ecosystem in Cambodia. He's active in policy dialogue with the government and other stakeholders. He's also the current CEO and co-founder of GGEAR. He's also served as a member of Board of Directors at CDRI. Welcome, Oknha Sok Piseth, and many thanks for joining us today. Yes. Could you provide a brief overview of the impact of COVID-19 on the private businesses in Cambodia since the outbreak?
In overall, I think COVID-19 have been impact not only Cambodia but business as overall globally, and everyone surprised and which lead to the economic crisis. And I think it's challenging. And Cambodia is fortunate that our government managed the COVID pretty well. Even we have some breakout once in a while, but somehow we manageable in a way that we have been strict guaranteeing policies. And so for Cambodia, I see the business in two ways. I think the impact of the business mostly that the heavy impact and direct impact is to the tourism sectors like the hotel, restaurant, and especially the province that have been revenue from all these tourist infrastructures like Siem Reap and Sihanoukville and other province, which is based the revenue on the tourism sectors. But when one of the business have been impacted, I think domino effect have been issue as well. And since globally also impact, I think some of the country also stop buying product from us as well. So garment factory somehow also have been impact from the export to Europe and US as well. So this overallly, I think it lead to economic back turn. So that's why last year we have GDP's minus, which we never have it for the past 2 decades.
So what you have mentioned is the effect is disproportionately impact on the businesses. For example, like enterprises in micro and small medium-sized business and gender disparity. So how are the impacts between these two types of firms? And are there any differences between male-led and female-led enterprises?
The two difference between the small and the large, I think not much. I think it's different in a way that is a proportion of planning. So who is planning well, who have reserved well for the crisis. For example, my firm, myself, GGEAR Group, in 2019, when we plan for 2020s, when we fix our budget and plan for 2020, we foresee that the 2020 is an economic crisis by somehow. So meaning that we lucky that we see the economic crisis before the COVID in 2019. So that's why our company-wise, we have been prepared, we have been reserve some cash in order to prevent the crisis. So when the COVID come, my company myself, we have some impact, but it's not a very heavy impact because we not really a direct impact business. We are in consumer electronic and in construction for the MEP. So mainly the construction is not that stuck much. So we're still working an ongoing project. And selling wise, last year we do sell also pretty well as well, especially during the outbreak. We sell a lot of refrigerators because a lot of people buy it to store food. So we fortunate that in our sector it's not a really direct impact. So for the difference between SME and large, I believe that the most different one is SME itself. One is a capital cash flow. Second is a planning ahead. I don't think that SME they have enough capacities in order to foresee ahead further of how the situation ahead and reserve the cash. I think manage the companies is like manage the families. We need to reserve, we need to foresee, we need to know what going to happen in the future. We are not the fortune tellers, but as a professional, we have to see some numbers. So a number can tell us something that what is going to happen. So if we plan it to be a worst scenarios, and when the situation happen, it's not that worst, meaning that we are well prepared. For example, in 2018 election, we plan in 2017. We also planning that prepare for the political issue. But when the election 2018 is very smooth and no political issue, our business jump up to another level. So this is a matter of how they plan and how they prepare themselves in a structured ways. And between male lead and female lead enterprise, I don't have much data on this kind of information. But for me, between male and female, they have pro and con by both what we call male and female. For me, I think that for me as a male, I think it's more decisive. Decision wise is more sharp, and women wise, I think they more detailed. So it's very hard to say that between male and female, which one is lead back, and because some female they also very strong as well. They have very good team. They plan very well, and then they can survive in a difficult situation as well. So it's hard to say, but I can say that both have their strength and weak point by both things. So it's hard to define, but because I don't have data, I don't know what to say about this.
Yeah, I agree with you with the planning ahead that we can manage for any shocks, any crisis. And I guess your company is quite big that you have enough reserve for the capital in order to manage this type of crisis. So move on to the next question on coping strategy. As we know that COVID-19 has pushed a lot of sectors move to digital transformation. So as your company deliver services and also products to the customer, so what kind of measure are your firm issue in order to respond to this crisis?
To respond to the crisis, we surprised. I think last year, early year, the first case in Cambodia is around March. So when the first case come, we sit down with our management. So we also surprised as well. But the thing is, when the crisis happened, we have been set up immediately. We set up the preparedness, the COVID-19 pandemic preparation for the internal companies. So in the guideline of around 10 page of the framework, we have been set up a crisis response team. So the crisis response team, they're responsible by each division. So we present it to all team, and the measurement, the symptom, everything in the framework of guideline. If they happen, where they should call, they have to know the crisis response team around 10 people from the different division, and then make sure that all team know they can call. And if someone in the company have been impacted by the COVID in the companies, we need to reserve the room already. They know where the room have been to escort them to stay in the room, and then call the hospital to pick up or testing. So this is some of the framework we have been did to respond. Secondly, to move to digital in two ways. One is to move in digital in a selling point, and another one is to move to digital in the operation internally. So GGEAR, by the 5-year strategic plan, we call strategy 2020, our objective is to move to centralize the management system. So in year 2019, we in the process of integration the new system to the company. So we integrate the ERP. So by 2020, we still have a few things left. So we just speed up. So luckily, by 2020, during the crisis, one is our system have been integrated to the centralized system. So approval line have been more easy. When we don't work in office, people can approve. Secondly, the banking like ABA, they also ready for the business approval. So that we have someone in the company, when we do payment, we reduce a lot of check. So they just post on the platform, the check, and then I approve finally the money transfer to the other people. So this can help in a way. And certainly regarding the retail also face a challenge, because we're not ready for the e-commerce for our internal companies. So at the time we use a platform of Facebook, that already platform, and other e-commerce platform in order to put up a product sale on the platform as well in retail during the outbreak for a few times. So we try to push our product, we sell it to make sure that we can maintain the sale. And also we focus to the province that is not really impact much by the COVID as well. So among our many province, we have a new retail store in the new province that is not really impact much. So that from time to time we see where we can do a promotion to push our sale by region by region. So this also one of the mechanism that we did in order to survival during the COVID. And in conclusion, I think manage it is somehow to make the team confident as well. So the way we have all the framework policies and plan in place, I think our team somehow they confident as well. They confident, they work harder, and during the crisis everyone work harder, so harder. I really appreciate to my frontline team, which is they take risks, they work, never stop, and especially our engineers, our technical, our retail sellers. So all of them in the front line, they work very brave, make our company can survive during the difficult situation.
You mentioned about the selling point of the retail, the e-commerce. So how the sales during this crisis comparing to before? I mean, when you introduce, for example, like Facebook platform for the customer, I just wonder how the statistic number, whether they go to the e-commerce, I mean online system better than going to face-to-face in the shop.
I think it depends on the generation of the consumers. I think consumer change behavior, but the generation X, the generation Z, so that the new generation of Cambodian people, they smart enough, they are more social media oriented, technology oriented. So I think we can see that the consumer behavior change a lot, and the new generation they prefer the e-commerce. They know a lot of platform that they can buy, even food they can order, something like that. But I believe that our old generation, our senior generation, senior citizen, they're not really familiar with that as well. So that's why I can say that we are at a crossing point, and our e-commerce law is not been approved yet at the time. We just approved recently and endorsed. But somehow e-commerce during the crisis it grow pretty well. And Facebook, you see the Facebook selling by online also, because some people, I feel that because some people we don't have e-commerce immediately, so Facebook is a only readiness platform that we can join and promote selling. At least we can sell something. But for me to compare between real and e-commerce, I can say it depends on the sectors of the business, whether what sector it is. But for my consumer electronics sectors, because it's big, people want to see and want to test, want to look how it look and feel. I think if you compare them in percentage, I can say 80-20. 80 is still people want to visit the store, and 20 people buy the e-commerce size. Yeah. But other sector like clothes, like shoe, I believe that some e-commerce platform they even bought from Europe and other country out as well, not only just in Cambodia. But in Cambodia itself, a lot of people also do sell by the Facebook as well.
You mentioned about the transformation on these two cases, for example, on the, your internal, your local management, and also the sales. So for the management, I just wonder if is there any difficulty introduce the new system to your team?
The reform is not easy. It have to have everyone need to have ownership. Everyone have to aware of the situation of the companies. So I believe it's not that easy. But for us, I think for us GGEARs, because our management is not in and out so much, so we are in a structured way that we are at the same page, we are at the same position. We sit down together since strategy 2020s, and now we move to strategy 2030s. So we sit down and build a strategy together, and we know where we want to go. We know where our challenge is. So for us, we are challenged, but we're not really challenged in a way that people don't want to move. We are in a challenge that operation system, we need to customize it. But people-wise, I don't think we have a much problem between the people, because especially during the COVID. So reform sometimes it's success when the time of crisis. So during the COVID, I can say that everything speed up, especially the digital transformation. So we are almost done, and then during the crisis, we are aware that without reform we will die. So everyone move faster. So for me, in conclusion, I can say that my team have no problem on the adapting new technology and reform, because we make the strategy step by step, and they are already aware of the policy on the ground already.
Thank you. So I guess the transformation in your company, you're very well prepared for it, and even you have the strategic for 2030. So moving on to the government policy in order to mitigate to the effects of the COVID-19. So the question is, to what extent the government policy measure has helped the business to deal with the adverse effects?
Early of 2020s, I remember that we have been mixed up with our government to see which sector we should support, what the impact. At the time, we focus more on Siem Reap. And GGEAR, we not only just a business of profit, but last year, 2019, we have sponsored independent consultant to do the survey on the business confidence and consumer confidence in Siem Reap. Because we see the trend of the tourism in Siem Reap down, not just of COVID, but it down since 2-3 years ago. So if we do analysis, you can see that the value added customer have down a lot, which is Ministry of Tourism is not aware and accept of this downside of the tourists at the time. And if we see the Chinese tourism is increasing. So in overall, the tourist is increased, but the value-added tourism have been decreased. So led by 2019, we have been conducted surveys. The way of we did the survey, we don't know the COVID itself, but we start survey around October. We decide to do it because we need to have a number in order to prove the government that Siem Reap completely tourism down, especially the value-added tourism. I mean, value-added meaning that the tourists that they come and they spend and they stay with us, not just come by the package tour and go back. That we call a $0 tourism. It's not like that. So that we do the consumer confidence and customer confidence survey. So GGEAR, we sponsors research firm to do this. So we're lucky by the early of 2020, we have been submit this to our government, Ministry of Economy and Finance, and also we have a chance that Young Entrepreneur Association Cambodia in Siem Reap also presenting to the local government as well. So that's why I think round 1, round 2, round 3 support from the government. We have a lot of input from this research and key fact of the local people in Siem Reap. Somehow, more or less, I can say that our government do the best job during the pandemic. He do with professionalism, the way they support, and the fiscal policy do a lot, but monetary policy, normally some country they can do the support by monetary policies, but we don't have a monetary policy to support our SME itself because we use dollarization. So many fiscal policy we can see our government do by step. Now we come up to the support until 7 rounds. So I think this is I can say that since I graduate and work in professionalism until now, I think it's the first time that I see the government supporting pretty well to our crisis. Not only just manage the crisis, but to support economic to be stay and maintain economic, especially to support our workers in order to survive during a difficult time.
Moving on to the the lesson learned. So the outbreak in Cambodia happened almost a year already. So what lesson do you think have the business owner or managers, particularly those of micro, medium, and small size enterprises, learn from this pandemic, and so far in relation to their operation?
For me, I think the lesson learned is about saving and planning. So business, we cannot just operate as daily operation. So business, we have to operate it by planning and seeing ahead from the external impact and internal impact and teamwork. So I think some business, they can survive, they can stay, they can perform better. It's not by chance. It's by teamwork, by professionalism, by the infrastructure that they have been built for the last few years. It's not just recently in the time of crisis. So I believe that this is the one of the lessons learned that the business owner and their managers have to be understand. And another one, also the lesson learned for the professional use and working as well, working level as well. Some company that have a good ethic, companies, they don't downside the staff. They try to survive all together, even cut off some salary, but they never, because we can see, I think some of the people can see that some company even done really direct impact, but they try to get the excuse to cut the salaries. I'm not saying about the industry that have been impacted, but some business that is not a really ethic of doing business itself. So this I can say that it's one of the lesson learned that when we looking for the professional job, you have to looking the company as well. So some company is a good professional and they do the ethic of doing business. So they care about the employee, they care about the customers, and some people they value a lot to foreign company as well. And during the crisis, some foreign company they don't care. They just close down the company. They go back. They downsize their stuff. They downsize their own stuff in order to survive. Uh, um, that is the thing that people should experience of. And this time of crisis, we can see a lot of things that who is good, who is bad, and who can stay, who will die. So I think this is a good timing. Yeah.
So now move to the next session about the looking forward for 2021. So my first question is, by looking forward for the rest of this 10 months of 2021, the current business is rampant by the virus. How would you assess the situation in this last 10 months of 2021? And in other words, are you optimistic, neutral, or pessimistic about this, and why?
I still think positively in my business, and situation wise in my sectors. I still see the potential growth, and for me, I think in a little bit different when we have a board meeting, and then the board question a lot when we put our plan to grow again around 30%, and then the board asks whether what you see about 2021, and then why you focus growth a bit high. So we have to be we are professional. We build our infrastructure for years, so we have a good team. For me, I always feel positive because we already plan because we plan 5 years, 10 years. So when every time we do a planning, we already forecast that the external factors every 10 years have global economic recession. So we plan the recession since 2017. But it's not happened, and then we keep continuous aware and prevention and be prepare for that all the time. So that's why I'm saying that we see 2020 as economic recession before the COVID. That's why we have some of the cash flow. So 2021 for me, we have been in disaster of 2020, which is a very difficult time already. But 2021, I don't think it's gonna be the same economic wise can be impact bad, but if you see the disease, at least you can see some brightness. At least you can see the vaccine have been deployed in some country. I believe in the next few months, when economic it take time to recovery, but somehow the situation of COVID will be resumed in very soon because of the vaccination, and even the vaccination takes some time as well. But somehow, many people, many countries, they get experience of how to control it, how to adapt with it. Not like the early 2020, which is we don't know what the disease is, why it killed a lot of people. Still, some people don't really believe that it can make a people life die, thousands of people every day. So in my conclusion, I still feel that 2021 is a positive hope for me. We always beat. Yeah.
Thank you. So you mentioned about your internal arrangement, and also you feel positive. So about the external, about the government policy, I want to ask, what would be the most needed policy to support the private business for an inclusive, sustainable, and resilient recovery?
For me, I think government they have more data than us. But for us, for me, I see we are agricultural country, but agro-processing is one of the key that government should be focused. And secondly, is make the environment of business to be fair competitiveness in order to increase the tax input, because we understand that most of the sector is really unfair in the way of competition. A lot of smuggling is still on the place, especially the business in consumer electronic and construction. Many products have been smuggling every day. So which is lead to the unfair competition for the good and compliant companies, which is they try to do their best. So I think without this, it's very hard to grow our agro processing as well, because agro processing business, somehow we are small. We are small in terms of our population, so our market size is small. So when we can in a business, when you cannot scale into a level, your cost will be very expensive, and you have to make the cost cheap for that. Second is a value ethic reduction to support the industry like the SME. So in business wise, one is scaling. So if we don't do scaling, we have to do value added. So we have to decide, we have to position. And Cambodia in a situation that from the government policy and the private sector have to sit down, and the government side have to understand the business model of the country as well. So without understand the business model of the private sector from the policy to the ground, it's very hard to compete with our neighboring countries. Yeah.
Moving on to the priority sector, I guess you mentioned already, but maybe you have a few more in mind. So what is the priority sector that the government as well as the private sector should focus on the path to recovery?
I think not just AODBs, but the government side, they have a very good infrastructure recently. So they have KE, which is Entrepreneurship Development Fund. They develop the Skill Development Fund in order to allow people that have a job during the difficult time in order to access the training. So they designed to have the SME Bank, which is the first phase. The SME Bank joined with the commercial bank 50% in order to support the SME in order to survival. But now SME Bank have been operated by itself. AODB, which is focused on the agricultural and agro processing, also play a very active role currently in order to support the agro processing business to be grow. So I mentioned already that the priority sector is agro processing, but because in agro processing line have many products, so I think government have to be smart enough to see which one is a priority one in order to support. So to support have to be from the policy point of view to the production have to be aligned and consensus, and prevention the flow, formal and informal flow of the informal product of the competitors to Cambodia as well. For example, if you want to produce coconut just example, and if we do it and we still have a lot of informal flow from our neighboring country, for sure that our cost cannot compete, because our scale is small and their scale is big, and their production scale can make their cost so cheap. So if we cannot do something in order to prevent the illegal input, it is very hard for our agro processing to scale up to a certain level and compete with all of them, because in production we talk about scale. So if we cannot scale to a certain level, you cannot grow as a country. Yeah. So that's why I can say sector is a way, but to priorities and see it as a business model from the government position to the production.
For the last question, if you have any additional comments or recommendation.
For me, I can see the COVID is a plus in some ways. I think COVID can make us we have to learn how to survive in our local countries. So they train us to adapt to our ecosystem that we have. For example, include the healthcare and everything, we have to know what we have currently. So for me, my recommendation, I think from the government to the private sectors, we have to understand, we have to see our position, whether our where we are good at, where we lack of, so that where we need to improve. And private sector wise, I think it's a time that the private sector have to see complement each other. That we cannot waste time to compete each other anymore. So any sectors that we can combine and grow, I think we should combine and utilize our little resource to work together and then make the company grow, and then we can see the future to go out. So I think this time is a very good time for us to sit down and to collaboration and to set a strategy to prepare for the incoming growing economy, because it never down forever. It will go back, it will resume back, it will grow back. So we have to be prepared for that.
This is the end of our episode. Thank you, Oknha Sok Piseth, for joining me today. So today's topic, we have discussed quite range from the impact, the coping strategy, as well as the recovery pathway in this year 2021. So I would like to thank you all for joining us today. Thank you.
We would like to thank CDRI's team for putting this together. Stay tuned for the next episode, and for more information on the project, please visit CDRI Facebook page, website, or YouTube channel. Have a nice day!